guys, my name is Savannah, and today we're back in Planet Zoo, specifically back in River Rock Zoo. Now, if you're not new to the channel, you'll know River Rock Zoo was my very first Planet Zoo project, which I ended a while ago, but as of recently, I decided that it needed a little revamping, it needed a little remodeling. I have grown so much as a builder and creator since I first started River Rock Zoo, and it's been really fun for me to go back in, basically demolish everything that I already did, and then start over again. So that's exactly what we're continuing today. The first episode is already out on the channel where we completely remodel the entrance, so if you've missed that, do be sure to check it out. That way you're up to date on what we're doing. But basically what I've done for this episode is I've deleted 2 habitats. So the timber wolves were the first animal that you see when you first walk into River Rock Zoo, and so they were the main habitat in the very front of the zoo right as soon as you get into as soon as you go through the entrance. And then off to the right were the reindeer, and so I've actually deleted both of those habitats. Reason being is that I wanted the wolves still to be the first animal that you really come across, or one of the first animals, so I still wanted them to be up at the front, because remembering that in this remodel, the idea is not to completely do a whole new project. The idea is a remodel and to keep a lot of the same ideas and a lot of the same building techniques and styles and whatnot the same, but just with my improved building skills and a whole new set of pieces, because we've had so many DLCs come out since I even ended River Rock Zoo. Like you can see here, I'm using a lot of the conservation pack wood beams for this kind of guest viewing pergola, shelter, whatever you want to call it. Those pieces were not available when I was still actively building River Rock Zoo. So that's the idea, is to kind of keep some of those themes and like the spirit of River Rock Zoo the same. So I still wanted the wolves to be up front, but I wanted to scoot them over a little bit to create a little bit more room for like an entrance plaza. When I was looking at the layout of River Rock Zoo, I noticed that, you know, you walk in and you're basically walked right into a habitat, and there was really no room for like restrooms or just open spaces, you know, where people are going to be entering and exiting. You kind of do want to have some open space just to allow people to move around each other, and it was really squished. Now, in game, I didn't see a lot of issues with the guests walking around. I mean, I don't really have guests in the park anyway, but they could navigate it okay. But as far as looking at it in terms of like realism, which is what we try to be inspired by here on the channel, they didn't have a lot of room to move around, and I just envisioned that guests would be kind of bumping into each other, and it would just cause a lot of traffic, especially because to the left of the entrance we have that restaurant, and so that would just cause even more congestion. So I wanted to open it up and leave room for more of like a plaza area, and then maybe like a small habitat for something. Haven't quite decided what that small habitat will be, but that was the idea behind leaving it open, so that we can kind of make more of a little plaza area and allow the guests some room. Now, I am working off of a reference picture. I love these little viewing areas that I have created with the slanted glass to kind of help with what would be the glare for guests looking in. So the idea is that this wolf habitat is very open, it's very natural in all of its foliage, and it still looks kind of newer or more modern, is really, again, trying to keep the spirit of River Rock Zoo. So I'm working off of a reference picture that had these style viewing areas, and you're not going to be able to view the wolves from basically anywhere on the path, which is what I had before. When I first started River Rock Zoo, I very much just kind of built in the blank spaces, and I really just built very open habitats that didn't have designated viewing areas, meaning that basically the path just went all around them, and almost from anywhere on the path you could look in and see the animals, which isn't necessarily the best design choice, because you want to kind of filter people to specific areas and give them good views of the animal, but you also want to let the animals be able to escape the view of guests if they choose to. So this habitat is built a little bit up on a hill where it's going to slope upwards away from the guest, which again keeps the animal a little bit easier to see. So even if they move further back in the habitat, they still could potentially be within view of the guest. But then there's also just lots of rocks and hidey areas where if they wanted to kind of go nestle down and be out of the view of the guests, they can be. But I'm very, very happy with how this little viewing thing came out, which is really easy to put up on the workshop. So I'm going to try to remember, and if I don't, yell at me down in those comments because I seem to always forget. But I'm going to go ahead and put this fencing as well as the viewing little gallery or viewing little shelter for the guests up on the workshop because it would be really easy to kind of adapt to whatever habitat you guys are making. And if you wanted to use it, I am happy to put that up there for you guys to use. It took me forever. So that brings me to my next point, or what I wanted to tell you guys about, that I did cut quite a bit of footage out of the build time on this. I had almost 6 hours of recorded footage for this habitat alone, which is a lot of recorded footage. Even sped up, like at my normal speed up time, it was going to be almost an hour video. It was going to be ridiculously long. So I did cut out me deleting everything in the beginning, as well as a lot of this fence work, because I decided to make my life harder in the sense that a lot of these individual fence pieces are going to be custom made because I raised the fence up onto the terrain and I kind of made it change with the terrain elevations. So it's not just these square pieces that I put all the way around. I do end up kind of individually going around and modifying the individual fence pieces, which was majorly time consuming. I'm really happy with how it turned out, but it reminded me of why I consider my builds to be inspired by realism and not one-for-one recreations, because it takes forever. I do not understand how there are some fantastic creators out there that make super realistic looking builds, and I'm sure it takes them like 10 hours or something like that to put like a whole habitat together. I don't have the time or the patience. So I'm really trying hard with River Rock Zoo to show off my build skills, I guess is what you want to say. So I did want to take the time to really kind of make this habitat show off everything that I've kind of learned since we ended River Rock Zoo. But yeah, for that reason, the guest area does not get done in this episode. The guest area is going to have to wait until either next episode or a future episode. I figured that I'll probably loop it in with like the plaza area or the small little habitat that I plan to put in the front area, because I just didn't have time and I didn't want to make this an hour-long video. So I really focus on the interior of the habitat and get that kind of all set up, as well as kind of the back holding area or back staging area for this habitat. Now, I have worked with large carnivores before in real life, specifically with bears, so I tried to take a little bit of my knowledge with that and kind of incorporate that into kind of the back holding area. I do not do an interior. You guys know how much I absolutely hate building interiors, so there is no interior in the back service area buildings that I incorporate. But there is a lockout. So there is a little fenced off area in the back with a little guillotine door so that the keepers can call the wolves back into the habitat, back into the holding area, and then service the habitat up front while the wolves are locked out of it. Shifting large carnivores is really important in all of their habitats. I have been to facilities where they are not really able to shift large carnivores, which presents a whole nother set of problems because they're not really animals that you can work free contact with, meaning that you can't really go in with them. So the facilities that I've visited that do work, I guess, kind of free contact, just have large enough habitats where the animals can be very, very, very far away from the keepers and they can go into the opposite end of the habitat to kind of spread food or do whatever they need to. Or one of the facilities that I visited was able to just kind of toss food in from like a raised balcony, like walkway area, and that they don't really ever truly enter the habitat. And it's big enough, it's over a couple acres, that the animals just kind of live naturally like they would in the wild. You know, their messes break down and become part of the soil. Other animals come by and help decompose and break down like food that they don't eat, stuff like that. So there is a variety of different ways that you can keep large carnivores in captivity, but River Rock Zoo specifically being a zoo that is going to be more in a city, these animals are much more contained. They don't just have open areas of land kind of sprawling around so they can let the wolves live kind of wild. They do have to be more hands-on with their management, meaning that they do need an area to shift them back into. So we do end up adding that. That was my really long-winded way of explaining to you that I added a shiftable area in the back. But then I also add all these rocks and around this kind of river feature. Originally, River Rock Zoo had a river that ran through, I think it actually ran through the bison habitat, through the flamingos, through the wolves, and then through the reindeer. So it was basically a river that ran across the front of the park, and it was incorporated into a bunch of different habitats. It was the very first thing that I really ever tried to design. So in theory, I like the idea still, but it really just wasn't executed a way that made me happy, that I wasn't really excited about. So I went ahead and got rid of that, and this is more of a man-made river/water feature in there. We do end up adding a little waterfall, so those little effects so that they have some movement in their water. But wolves really aren't going to swim, so it's more of like a shallow pool for them to drink and kind of, you know, they do end up running in and out of it. But more just for, like I said, some movement in their habitat and then a focal point so that it's kind of more interesting to look at for the guests. A lot of habitat designs are specifically made to be interesting looking to guests. Unfortunately, people have a really bad habit of looking at habitats and thinking that they are bad or poor because they wouldn't want to live in them. It's really hard for people to think about habitats and the necessities of the animal as if you were the animal, and to anthropomorphize animals is a really common thing that people do, in that they think about the animals in terms if they have human feelings or thoughts. So a lot of habitat design is specifically made to make it so that the guests feel that it's interesting, that it's exciting, and therefore that it's good enough for the animal, which in reality, it could be a lot less kind of intricate or complicated, and the animal would probably be just fine. Now, animals do need their basics. They do need shelter, food, and enrichment. Enrichment is a huge thing that not a lot of facilities put an emphasis on, or rather, I should say, facilities are putting more emphasis on enrichment as we kind of learn more about the animals, but it's something that I'm really passionate about as a keeper myself. I think that all of the animals that are kept in captivity need some sort of enrichment, basically just meaning that their life needs to be enriched, improved. We need to give them things that mentally and physically stimulate their natural behaviors like they would be doing in the wild. So anything incorporated in a habitat that is for enrichment purposes, I think is really, really important. So giving them things to explore, and most oftentimes for like large carnivores, I know when I worked with bears, we would give them boxes full of their food. We would bury their food. It's lots of food-based stuff because animals are really driven by finding their food in the wild. So just anywhere that we could kind of hide and tuck away food that they have to kind of go and search for it, instead of it just being like open and available for them on a plate. So in this wolf habitat, there are some, what do you call them? Like platforms, wooden platforms, which you could put food up onto so that the wolves have to get up on there. You could hide them in boxes. I do put a cardboard box in the habitat. You could hide them on rocks, in bushes, behind trees, you know, stuff like that. Stuff that the wolf would have to kind of go searching for. So that's really what all the elements in the habitat are good for, like all the rocks and trees and foliage and stuff like that, for hiding all the wolves' food and getting them to search for stuff, and then giving them hidey places and whatnot. But the wolves probably don't care about the waterfall. They don't care about there being movement in their little river or anything like that. As long as they have access to water, they would probably be just fine. We've moved on now to work on the backstage kind of holding area. I found a reference picture for a building that I really liked. So again, River Rock Zoo, when it was originally built, was I used a lot of these like repetitive wood beams, and oh my lord, the piece count. So I'm really trying to maintain a lower piece count with the remodel. So using kind of these thicker beams. They are repetitive and there are a lot of them, but this kind of is what I mean by keeping the spirit of River Rock Zoo, is I really want to keep a lot of the original design ideas that I had kind of implemented in the remodel of the buildings and things like that. So what I end up doing is just building this one kind of backstage building and then duplicating it 2 more times to give it an interesting shape and make it look like it's big enough to hold the service areas for the wolves. And what I mean by the service areas is inside this building would probably be like a kitchen area, maybe a walk-in freezer, somewhere that the keepers could prepare the wolves food and anything that they need in order to care for the wolves. But there's probably not, I mean, maybe there might be a little room, like if a wolf was sick, they could bring it off exhibit back there. But some facilities are not able to incorporate stuff like that, and you actually have to manage your animals on exhibit, meaning that if you have a sick animal, you might have to set up like a temporary corral out in the exhibit, something like that, to keep the animal separated, or in this case, the back shiftable area might have to be used, and then the keepers aren't able to go into the exhibit to care for the healthy wolves. They would have to find some other way to kind of toss food in there and get away with not cleaning very often, stuff like that. So I think this building is big enough to incorporate something like an offstage holding, off exhibit holding area. I'm combining all the words together. An off exhibit holding area for the wolves. And what I really tried to keep in mind too with building like the shiftable area as well, is it would need to be big enough so that you could kind of butt up like a carrier or a crate or something like that to the guillotine doors, because that's going to be how you would move the animals in or out of the exhibit. You would probably have to either dart them to get them into the carrier, or if you're able to train them to voluntarily crate on their own, you could do that. You would butt up the crate to the guillotine door, open it, ask the animal to go in, close the door, and then you've got your animal in a crate and you can move them. So there is a little like additional service area outside that is big enough that you could kind of butt up a crate like that. So I was really trying to kind of utilize all of the knowledge that I have and the skills that I've built, again, in playing in Planet Zoo and improving on my build skills and using all of the pieces to kind of implement a lot of those necessities for a habitat. And again, not really going for like a one-to-one recreation or like exact realism, just realism inspired. So keeping in mind all those little details and kind of hinting at them, because I don't have hours and hours to spend or the patience to spend on making something that is uber realistic and exactly correct. So hopefully you guys like how this has turned out. Like I said, I'm really, really happy with it. I do end up changing the roof here because the little, what do you call those? Like I think it's like the slate roof or something like that. The little roof tiles, I didn't feel like really fit into River Rock Zoo, and I felt like I was kind of getting away from the original design or style of River Rock, because the roof that I ended up changing to, the metal roof with the lines on it, I forget exactly what it's called, but the roof that I switched to was the original one that I did use when building River Rock, so I felt like it was just appropriate to kind of keep that as the roof because it has, you know, the look and the feel that River Rock Zoo originally had. So as we continue to build, I want to talk about the timber wolves just a little bit. Something that I try to include in a lot of my videos and I've kind of gotten away from, but I want to get back to. So this habitat being for the timber wolves, I do end up adding one Arctic wolf in there just for a bit of variety, and the timber wolf doesn't come in any kind of white morph color. So I thought that was cool to kind of add that. But let's go ahead and read just a little bit about the wolf. So the wolf is an ancestor of the domestic dog, but instead of barking, it howls. The gray wolf has a number of subspecies, including the Arctic wolf, which vary in color and size according to where they live. The gray wolf has very strong jaws with sharp canine teeth for tearing and chewing meat. They do hunt in packs, so wolves may hunt alone, but usually they hunt in a family pack of between 3 and 30 wolves. The pack is led by an alpha male and female, and the rest of the pack is usually made up of their grown-up pups. Hunting in packs helps wolves kill large animals such as moose or elk. They are good swimmers and, when necessary, pursue their prey into water. The timber wolf can eat a lot of meat at one meal and then go without food for a considerable amount of time. Though it does eat large animals like caribou, musk ox, deer, and moose, most of its diet consists of small animals like mice, rabbits, and squirrels, just because those animals are going to be easier for the wolf to hunt. If you're talking about a carnivore, you have to consider the amount of effort that goes into hunting the prey versus the payout. So if they can spend minimal amounts of effort to catch like a rabbit or a squirrel or something like that and get a decent meal out of it, that's probably going to be what's easiest for the wolf. It also eats fish, crabs, and dead animals. So going to be a little bit of a scavenger if any food is left over. Family life. Wolves generally pair for life. Mating takes place in late winter or early spring. A litter of 4 to 6 pups are born about 2 months later. So they only have about a 2-month gestation period, which is pretty quick. The family stays together for some time while the parents teach the pups hunting skills. In about a year, the cubs reach adulthood, but may stay with the pack for longer. As we talked about, the packs are generally made up of mom and dad and all their adult grown babies, so they can stick with the pack for long periods of time. What are the main threats to wolves? The wolves' biggest enemy is us. It's humans. For many centuries, wolves have been trapped, shot, and poisoned because people fear that wolves present a danger to cattle and sheep. Sometimes they were killed for their fur as well. Wolves have been virtually exterminated from the continental US and Western Europe, although a few survive in Spain, northern Scandinavia, and Italy. They've also been reintroduced to Yellowstone. If you guys have not kind of heard that story, I highly recommend looking that up. It's a great success story and a great demonstration of how ecosystems work together. There was a whole slew of problems that ecosystem was having without wolves present, in that there was way too many deer, way too many kind of hoofstock animals that were eating all the grasses. There was far less foliage, which meant things like rabbits and all the smaller rodents that feed off of that were not thriving. So once wolves were reintroduced, it kind of set everything back to balance, and there was a whole bunch of problems that got resolved simply because wolves were reintroduced. So I do highly recommend looking that up, because it's a huge success story, and it really demonstrates the importance of making sure these animals stay in their ecosystems, and make sure that they're all happy and healthy, that they kind of all play a role in each other's lives. Wolves seldom attack humans. In fact, very few records of them doing so exist. As long as there is plenty of natural prey, wolves prefer not to attack domestic livestock. So learning to coexist with them is very, very important. So that's just a little bit of information about timber wolves, or I guess just wolves in general. I think that they are awesome animals. There is a specific wolf sanctuary out by me, which I have not had the opportunity to visit, but I hope that I do soon. It's about an hour and a half or so away from me. It's located in Julian, I think technically it is, Julian, California. And they specifically work on rehabilitating and caring for wolves. It's the only animals that they care for there, I believe. Which I think is awesome because they are not an easy animal to work with. So it's a very, very cool facility. Back to what we are doing. I told you guys in the beginning this was a long one. It's about a 35-minute video or so. So we are just about getting to the end of the building in the habitat. And it looks like here that I am working on lots of foliage and rocks and all my favorite stuff to add to the interior of habitats. I was really trying to make this one look very naturalistic. And at first, I don't remember if I cut it out or not, but originally I had made the whole enclosure dirt and kind of used the lighter dirt to make pace marks. But when I started looking at wolf habitats and reference pictures and stuff like that, I noticed that most of them are very grassy and very heavily foliaged. So I changed my mind. I made everything grass and did the trace marks, or not trace marks, the pace marks with dirt. And I end up using my new favorite grass piece, which I was not aware of until I made this video, is the fog grass piece. I use that one very heavily along with the drin grass and one other grass. I think it's the periwinkle or something like that. But anyway, really heavily kind of grass this whole habitat together. And I end up achieving the look that I really wanted to achieve, in that basically the whole thing is planted and the only bare areas are going to be the places that the wolves are walking really constantly. And that way, you know, they're packing down the grass and it's not going to grow in those certain areas. So the well-walked areas are not going to have grass. But trying to keep everything very, yeah, you can see here, this is where I do the pace marks with the dirt. I end up not liking it. It looks way too plain, too much open area for like a carnivore like the wolves. So I end up redoing that. I think here I'm going to delete a whole bunch of stuff. I delete the ferns and whatnot because I just was not happy with how they were coming out. In here, I'm going to redo the little dirt area paths that the wolves are going to walk. And then it probably took me a whole hour alone just to grass the whole area because I was really adamant that nothing looked tiled, nothing looked repetitive. It looked as natural as possible. My OCD was in overdrive, so I was rotating things using different pieces. You can see here as I'm pulling out all the different grass pieces and discovering the fog grass is the one I just moved and I'm building off of right now. I love that piece and I don't understand why I've never seen it before. It's a fantastic grass piece. So here you can see I'm just kind of using that one piece that I kind of built with multiple grass pieces and rotating that, sinking it into the ground and really making it look like there are tall grasses all over the place. And immediately the habitat started to kind of come together and look like what I intended it to look like. So yeah, this takes me like an entire hour because I made sure that everything was kind of grassed and covered and lush and all that kind of stuff. Really following the pace marks that I put down and making them skinnier in some places. That way they weren't these kind of open, bare spots. And then I go through and I put some rocks in kind of the corners and the places where the paths kind of split, in that I wanted to make sure it looked like the wolves had something to walk around, like there was a purpose for why the paths are where they are. Like right there in the back, they have to walk around that rock, but then on the other side of the trees, so in between the rock and the tree is where the path is going to be, because that's where the wolves are naturally going to have to walk. So trying to keep things in mind like that when you're doing things like track marks and stuff like that in a habitat, there has to be a reason that the animal would walk where it is walking. So around the perimeter of the habitat is a big one because animals frequently walk around the perimeter of their habitats, and then around like big landmark things in their habitats like trees or like rocks or something like that. So trying to keep that in mind. Here I do a kind of natural ring around the water fixture or lake, river? God, I'm not thinking of my words properly right now. Around their water. Normally I would do like a plaster side that's kind of sloped, which is what one of my favorite things to do for water. But in this one, I wanted to keep it much more natural looking. So this is going to be either real or fake rocks that the zoo put around the edge of the water to make it look a little bit more natural and less man-made. I do forget to put drain decals until after I am completely done with the cinematics. So they're there now and they will be there going forward. But in the cinematics and in this footage, you're not going to see drains, which I always forget. And I was so mad at myself for forgetting, but I caught it and I put them there. So now they look uber realistic. So there we go. Good job, Savannah. Placing some sticks all around just for some more interest and stuff, trying to just make it look busy and full and natural, really. I mean, I don't really have anything else to say about the foliage. I told you this voiceover or this video took me forever, and now I'm stuck here talking to you guys for about 30 minutes. Not that that's a bad thing. I have a list of things that I wanted to tell you about, and I've run to the end of my list. So those are all the things I wanted to tell you about for this habitat. But as you can see, as we kind of finish up the foliage and switch over to working on kind of the back holding area, I did build all of that off camera. I got carried away and forgot that I wasn't recording, so I did end up building this whole cage thing off camera. The doors off camera, but now we're working on the guillotine doors. So using those editable signs, because those are the skinniest, plainest metal pieces that I could find. So this is going to be the way that the keepers open the door and let the wolves into this back kind of shiftable holding area. And there is a little handle that goes kind of over on the other side. That back little area where I end up putting like a hose and some shovels and a rake or, tools or stuff like that is kind of where I imagine they would bring in like a carrier and they could kind of butt it up against the door or something like that, or bring it into this holding area and butt it up against the guillotine like I was talking about before, to kind of make sure that the animal, when you're moving animals, it's always good to have like a secondary containment. So if you are loading them up into a carrier, having the carrier be in an enclosed area that is not escapable is really important in case things go wrong. That way your animal is not just free to the open world. So both of these areas, both the area where the wolves can be shifted and then the service area that the keepers would be coming in and out of, are completely contained. You can see that I continued the chain link fence across the ceiling of even the service area. That way, just worst case scenario, your animal is always contained. I have heard horror stories of other keepers, not myself, fortunately, working with large carnivores like wolves and like tigers, where animals have escaped their containment area and potentially gotten out into the open park and into the area where the guests are, which obviously would be worst case scenario for any keeper or any facility. So making sure that you just always have those kind of containable areas is really important. And unfortunately, some facilities just aren't built with that, so you kind of have to make do to be as safe as possible. But I wanted River Rock Zoo to be more of a, I guess high end is not really the right descriptive term, but I can't think of any other word. They have the funds and the resources to make sure that their keepers and stuff are safe and that their habitats are set up properly. So that's really what I wanted to keep in mind for building in this park. Now, I do add some gutters to this building and somewhat do some details. It does need a little bit more. I was actually trying to decide if on the other side I should put another kind of off-stage holding actual enclosure for wolves. So as I was talking about in the beginning, I actually totally forgot that I was thinking about this when I was telling you about that, where the wolves, if there was somebody that was sick, if they had cubs that needed to stay with mom, or whatever the case may be, if they have a new wolf and they haven't quite done introductions yet, they have kind of a back off stage holding enclosure. So I was actually thinking of putting one on the other side, but again, just ran out of time and I didn't want this video to be like a whole hour long. So in a future video, the building needs more details and then potentially another wolf habitat on the other side of the building. In which case I would probably need to build another kind of hallway shiftable enclosure, like maybe along the back side of the building, to say like that's how they would get the wolves from one side to the other, or the keepers would just have to crate up the animal, bring it over, and move them that way. But that's far more labor intensive than having the wolf have like a little area to walk through. But here you go. Here are the end cinematics of the habitat. The wolves very happy in their enclosure, a few timber wolves and an Arctic wolf in there. I'm really, really happy with how this one came out, and I hope you guys like it as well. Thank you again so much for watching, and if you made it this far, congrats to you for hanging out with me for a whole 30 minutes. I really appreciate you. Don't forget to leave a like on the video and comment down below. All that engagement stuff really helps me out, and I greatly do appreciate it. If you're interested in future Planet Zoo content, be sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on anything. We do have a whole bunch of fun links down in the description below, including all my social medias, as well as my website where we have lots of Planet Zoo helpful stuff, as well as some merch. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and check that out. And until next time, I will talk at you guys in the next video. Bye!